Hi, I'm Harold Pan, physical therapist here. Today I want to talk to you about the mechanisms of pain that are driving some of the funny sensations that one might get when you get CRPS. Now, we can break down what CRPS means another day. I'll give you the short and quick and skinny on it. It's complex regional pain syndrome. It's complex, so that's why that's its own talk for its own day. But what happens is, like a normal injury, it tends to present itself in a really funky way where pain persists and in a very aggressive way that behaves unlike any other. Let's take a fracture of the foot. There's a little bone in the foot called the fifth metatarsal. It's that little pinky foot, not the pinky toe, but the bone that leads up to the pinky toe. And let's say it gets fractured, gets put in a boot for a few weeks, nothing, like just let it heal. But for some reason, once you take that foot out and the bone's fully healed, it is still really painful to weight bear, and it gets swollen, it gets cold, it gets purple, all sorts of funny things. And then you start to get clammy and sweaty and nauseous, and it's just persists and persists and persists. You get weird, like burning up the leg, all sorts of weird things. And over this little foot injury, kind of weird, right? Why does this happen? I'm gonna take some select pieces here from the neuroscience of pain here. So for one, the stimulus from that foot fracture and that immobilization, if this was an injury that was coming out of nowhere, it took you out of commission during a time of high stress where your nervous system was constantly bombarded and there was a lot of immunocompromisation here and inflammation that's occurring. Well, what's going on is this is essentially overtaxing the nervous system. Now, when I say nervous system, I'm talking about the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which are all the nerves that go in from the periphery of the body to the spinal cord, and the ones that come out and efferently impact the muscles and the things that act and that we do to commit an action in our body, namely muscles here. And what might account for this here? Why is this staying? Why is it not behaving normally? Well, that immobilization, being stuck in that boot, means that for the longest time, there's been no activity going on in your brain and spinal cord with pertinence to that site of injury. Is the bone healed? Yes. But is it healed in a way where we can't really interact with that part of our body? At this point in time, yeah, there is a little bit of a change. And that change is called plasticity, neuroplasticity. What that means is, the term plastic is it's malleable. The circuitry in the brain can change. And when I say circuitry, every cell in our spinal cord and our brain there consists of nerve cells called neurons. And the way neurons function are to communicate information. It's called a synapse, where the dendrite of the neuron, where it spits out neurotransmitters, which are pieces of chemicals that will open up the next neuron to attach to the receptors on the next one. It opens up and gives more information. So these are organic things that change with whatever stimulus is applied. Now, I went into this brief microscopic cellular view because what happens is that normally that foot fracture, or that area where that foot was fractured, you're weight bearing, you're constantly giving stimuli information into that part of the body, which subsequently interacts with the knee, the hip, the back, and interacts with your balance, influences everything. But if it's been stuck in a boot for a long time, what happens? There's no communication about weight bearing. There's no communication about normal sensation. It's just been hiding away in a boot. And let's just say throughout this whole time, you're just kind of expecting a normal recovery, and you're sitting there, you're working, whatever. You're like, don't do this, don't put weight in and sure, follow your precautions, but like also realize that there's got to be a proactive approach to this too, because what happens once you take it out and you immediately expect to start moving, you run into this issue, right? The foot feels swollen and it's like, why does it hurt so damn much? That's because that increased sensitivity, there's a void of information coming in. Suddenly it's this massive deluge of information. How does that deluge come about? Well, there's the afferent neuron. That's basically the neuron that comes from the receptor, the sensation of vibration, touch, noxious stimulus, which is we can call, for inaccurate purposes, but we'll call that pain. That first neuron that comes, and I'm going to take my hand for example because you can see it from here, it goes all the way up into the spinal cord, in this case from this area around C7 or C8, that level. There it will synapse, it will communicate and send information to another neuron called an interneuron. That interneuron serves as a gatekeeper of information. That gatekeeper basically filters out and discriminates signals that will subsequently enter our brain. It will go up into another second order, third order neuron that will reach my cortex, my consciousness. So for an example, I'm going to give you another side. You see this polo shirt I'm wearing right now. I don't really notice it on me. I see it on me, but I can't, I can feel the texture, but I'm not overwhelmingly perceiving this. My brain's not freaking out being like, hey, you've got the shirt on, he's got the shirt on. It feels kind of funny. It feels a little dry. My skin's itchy. Unless if I, just had a sunburn. Otherwise, my brain is not really registering it. It's just like, cool, whatever. That is because the interneuron that processes that incoming information from the body that sends information to my spinal cord, it is blocking out all of that. So it's telling my consciousness, this is not really that important to know. Like, it's all good. You've already gotten dressed for the day. You don't have to think about it. In a case where there's been tissue damage or pain or prolonged immobility because now there's no information come in, suddenly the influx of info, well, what that's going to do is it's going to make my body a lot more sensitive, and normal sensations may now start to be really painful because it's just anything, and the interneuron that's regulating it, with prolonged pain, that creates this inflammatory effect that can kill off the interneuron. And now information coming in, it doesn't get checked. There's no gatekeeper, and now everything may be perceived as threat, as danger, and therefore pain. Now, why do I say threat and danger, not so much pain? Because pain is a function of survival. Pain basically is more of a way of our brain saying, this can be bad, so let's do something about it on a philosophical level here. The problem is when everything gets perceived as pain, we can't really function with it until, adrenaline kicks in and you gotta run away from incoming bus or from a lion or a bear. Anything that gets that survival mechanism into gear. There are exceptions to that case. We're not going to go into that here today. Why does it swell up? Well, prolonged pain, prolonged stimulus that creates irritation to the nervous system, that can create this inflammatory response, which then gets converted into an immune response. Fewer regulators means now we're not just talking about the somatic side of the nervous system, we're talking about the autonomic side, where the autonomic side is that switch on between sympathetic and parasympathetic. That's when we start to have more an inflammatory issue, and therefore that area that was chronically fractured and it's all good, it's all healed up now, but it still swells up and it gets purple. It has this weird conduction of temperature. It's faulty because of that constant bombardment, and therefore it leaks into that immune response there. This is a quick and dirty here for something like complex regional pain syndrome type 1, where it's like more of a fracture, and it fails to heal, and you get those burning pains, and it goes into different parts of that are creeping up into above and below that joint, but doesn't behave normally. There's also the contextual factors here. How much stress are you in? Were you in at the time of injury, during the period of recovery, and currently? That stress is more of like a top-down media approach, but we can basically think ourselves into a tizzy and create this cortisol secreting process there. And cortisol also up-regulates the amount of inflammation here. That can create this global impact there. And then you start to have more difficulty with just regular function in terms of there's more appetite suppression, there's lower energy and more fatigue levels, and it becomes more and more complicated here. But in short, it goes from this local painful area into more global fatigue and other multiple systems issue here, which is an account for what's going on. Hope that helps kind of put things into perspective. Now, what can you do about it? I'm going to give you just the quick and simple answer, and then you can follow up on another video here for more in-depth explanation. Essentially, what we need to do is we need graded exposure to movement, and we need to remap the brain. When I say remap the brain, we have to start to rebuild the sensory map by introducing things that, one, we interpret as it's all good, it's a low threat level. And that's not always going to be that simple and black and white when you're in this chronic state there. So we do this process of ruling things out. Normal sensation. Okay, can somebody else touch your foot? Can you touch your foot? Can you put your foot in grass? Can you put it in sand? Can you put it in warm? Can you put it in a little bit cooler water? Can you put it in other textures? Okay, can you start to put a little bit of weight bearing on it? Can you get like one of those old school scales and see what 5 pounds of pressure feels like? What about 10 pounds? What about 15 pounds? And start to give your brain some sense of, this is what weight bearing feels like. This is what it feels like when I invert and kind of roll my foot a little bit back and forth. Find that sweet spot on what doesn't feel awful, what doesn't feel terrible, and go with it and do more of that. This isn't a blanket one-size-fits-all approach to every kind of injury, but for this kind of injury, this is really valuable because now you are starting to recreate a sense of normal and giving your spinal cord like normal sensations, and start to rebuild this map where maybe another interneuron can come in and take the place of the ones that died off, or more circuits can be established where your brain can start to kind of piece things together. It might not be the same kind of quick, rapid response. You still might have that little pain with weight bearing, but then you may bypass it a lot faster because it's like, oh, wait, this is all good. My fracture's all healed up. All right, I'm just gonna kind of linger here and try something different. I'm gonna move in a different way just to create new context. Like, this is all good, because consciously you might be telling yourself, hey, this fracture is healed, I'm all good. But then in the back of your mind, there's this weird CRPS thing that's going on. I don't understand it. Ding, 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 alarm bells go off. So it was the rebuilding process. And the second thing, exercise. And that kind of encompasses a lot of things, but what might work? Maybe if it's a foot injury, you do a little bit of upper body work. You do some shoulder presses. You do left-sided, like leg presses. You lift your arms up in the air. You do like an arm bike. You get in the water and start kind of doing some power walking in the water, or you swim. Any sort of thing to tax your cardiovascular system and raise your blood pressure a little bit, get your heart rate up a little bit, just to change it up, change the context, and put a little bit of controlled stress. That can also teach your body that these things are okay, and you can get some happy chemicals going on in your brain. Many other approaches, but I wanted to give you these two things: graded exposure and light to moderated exercise. Drop any questions below, comments. Let me know what works, let me know what doesn't. Thanks.